Hello, Tech Pros, episode 216.
Remember, you don't have to take a huge step. You can take a small step, but you got to make it real. You got to have a transaction, right?
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week, we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity. Wednesday, leadership. Thursday, technology. Friday, people and communication. Saturday, entrepreneurship. And Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Patrick Vlaskovits. Happy Saturday, Patrick.
Thanks, Chad. Happy Saturday to you, too.
Are you ready to hustle?
I am born ready to hustle.
I hope so, because you know what, I won't spoil it for the audience, but you got hustle all over your name right now. Patrick Vlaskovits is a New York Times best-selling author and entrepreneur. His writing has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, the Wall Street Journal, and the Browser. Patrick routinely speaks at technology conferences nationally and internationally, including South by Southwest, the Grow Conference, the Turing Festival, and the Lean Startup Conference. He serves as a mentor for 500 startups, seed funds, and Startup Accelerator, and is founder and CEO of Superpowered. And Patrick, I got to admit, every time I have read your bio here, when I get to the end, I don't know what it is. I just got a little bit of goofy in me today, I guess, and you're probably going to think I'm a nutball here. But when I get to the end and it says CEO of Superpowered, I want to read that in like a really bad Austrian accent, like a CEO of Superpowered.
Actually, I love that. That would be great. It's funny that you mentioned that because Schwarzenegger, when he actually had his movies done, he figured out that he actually got the writers, when they were writing these movies, to give him a line that he would sort of kind of, hit with that heavy Austrian accent, because he would get people to imitate him, right? So you get Saturday Night Live and all these people would make fun of him. But he figured out every time someone imitated him, made fun of him, basically, $100 check lands in his pocket.
That's
right?
Awesome.
So if you want to hit that emphasis on Superpowered, by all means, go for it.
All right. Patrick Vlaskovits, the CEO and founder of Superpowered.
Dankeschön.
There we go. Cool, man. So what are you doing there at Superpowered? Is this basically a place where you're building robots and capes and machines and whatnot for all of our superheroes in the Marvel and DC universe, or something completely different?
So we are giving superpowers, but not to actual superheroes. And so what we're doing is we are bringing some innovation in something called DSP, digital signal processing, to the market. And I don't want to get too technical, but basically, if you look at sort of the modern mobile world, the land of iPads, iPhones, all sorts of Android devices, underlying that world is basically two things. One is an ARM processor, and then two is an operating system that sits on top of that. So that could be iOS, that could be Android, could be actually others as well. And what we're seeing is devices are getting smaller and more powerful. And as they get more powerful, they use more, they do more on the device. So back in 2005 or 2004, 2004 maybe, when I think I had my first cell phone, it was like a Motorola Razr. Besides being a phone, it could play back like MP3s, which back in 2004, whenever it was, that was like a big deal. Like, this phone could play back MP3s, right?
Yeah.
And the reason it could only do that, because the processor was pretty small, pretty limited in terms of power back then. Today's phones, obviously, like, they do everything. In fact, being a phone is like the least important thing they do, right? And so they not only play back audio, but you can process and render audio, meaning like you can do actually like DJ tools where you speed up and slow the music down. You can actually do real computing. And our innovation is that we use radically less power on these devices, using our algorithms to power these devices to do audio rendering, things like that. And the reason that that's a big deal, or we think it's a big deal, is if you believe in this world of VR coming and AR coming, you're going to see we're asking these devices to do quite a lot when it comes to rendering video and audio. So today, like the Samsung Gear VR, it basically overheats in like 20 minutes, 30 minutes if you're in a VR app. And the reason why is, I mean, the CPU and the GPU are going full out when they're rendering the video and the audio and the physics engine.
All right, so you were talking about, so you had covered, today we're the phones can process and render the audio. We have all the DJ tools, and you were just starting to get to the point where, VR, if you believe VR is coming to our pockets, then you're going to need to be able to process all this audio and video information, and you guys are going to help render that audio information, in the coming days and years.
Exactly right. So this I actually believe that the shift, that like the mobile era, it actually didn't begin with the iPhone. Actually, I think it's beginning right now. And it's funny because if you look at some evidence, you see, iPhone sales are flatlining. There's not huge growth there. I actually think that VR and wearables and hearables, like the Apple's AirPods, are going to create a computing boom where this feels like there's like a dip in sort of what can be done with mobile devices. And now I think both on the hardware side and us on the software side, you're going to see incredible amount of technology come to the market, and that supercomputer in your pocket is going to get even more super. And so that's sort of where, when I think about Superpowered, what do we do? And one of my favorite quotes that's attributed to a guy named Marshall McLuhan is, "We become what we behold. We shape our tools, and afterwards our tools shape us." And that's sort of a philosophy we have at Superpowered, is how can we build better tools? How can we provide better tools to developers doing audio rendering, doing VR, doing digital signal processing on these very low-powered small devices, so they can actually shape better tools. So that's in a nutshell what we do at Superpowered.
Dude, that's so awesome, because I actually started my career in the audio video multimedia space in webcasting before webcasting was a thing. So this was in 98, 99. We were building some tools that automated and aggregated the data from all the different media players. Back in the day, it was QuickTime on the Apple, and then it was Real Player, if you remember the Real Studios, and then Windows Media, and all the different recording options from all of those. And so when we would have a presentation like at a conference or something like that, we could stream it live or on demand by taking all those video feeds and then compressing them down into, back then, the really, really high bandwidth was like 300K a second. So it's basically like the size of a postage stamp, right? And the processor power required to do the audio and the video was just astronomical back in the day, right? And it still is, right? But now we're doing everything in high definition, both high definition on the video and the audio. So I feel you. Anything that we can do to reduce the number crunching efforts that it takes our computers to be able to process this video, process this audio, is fantastic, because not only is it going to save it processor power, it's going to save it battery life on your mobile devices. It's going to save it time, where now your processor can do other things as well as process the audio. So it sounds like really, really cool stuff that you guys are working on there.
Well, thank you. And I think I should hire you, because you've done our pitch for us. So that's exactly right. Where if you look at sort of the history of media, whether it's online or on smart devices, the creators, the developers, the artists, they always push the boundaries of what's possible vis-a-vis just sort of processing, right? They always want to do more. They always want more video, better audio, more action, whatever it is. And there's an insatiable appetite for actually computing and processing power. And just like you said, right now our SDK allows you to basically do more with less. So we actually give you back CPU that you can use for video. And so we're going to be rolling out, on our product roadmap, we've got image processing SDK and all those other things basically that are predicated on the same technology. Where we have the fundamental innovation we have is not our algorithms, but how we basically derive our algorithms. And in this space where, again, like you're seeing AirPods, where Apple basically put an ARM processor basically Apple put legitimately a computer into these earbuds is a big deal, and I think augurs well for the future of mobility.
Yeah, there's been a lot of mixed press results that I've seen in the last few weeks, right? As soon as they made the announcement that all the haters are hating on, oh my gosh, what you do, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. And other people saying, no, they're making room for something more awesome. The technology eventually has to change. This is the right time to change it. And so both sides of the fence, no matter where you are, the truth of the matter is things are changing, right? And Apple's leading the way, as they tend to do in many cases. And whether you like the results or you don't like the results, or you can see the vision or you can't see the vision, like now there is, in my opinion, more options on the market for vendors, both on the hardware side, on the like audio earbud side, as well as on the software side, to do some pretty amazing things that we haven't been able to do before.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I don't know if the AirPods are going to be successful as a product in and of themselves, but I do know from our point of view is if Apple is taking the time to put an ARM SoC in there, they view these as a platform, and it's not just a pipe. It's not just a little bit of DSP meant to route audio. They actually view this as a computing platform, which I think, again, could be a really big deal. We'll see. Only time will tell. But the technology has gotten a lot better on the hardware side as well as the software side. So I think we're in pretty interesting times.
Good times. Well, speaking of good times, dude, we're going to have to bring you back for Technology Thursday, because I can tell you are a like-minded individual that can totally geek out with me way down into the bits and bytes of, ARM processing and, signal to noise ratio on the audio side and all this kind of stuff, which is super fun for me to geek out on. But you know what? Today is Entrepreneurship Saturday, and it's all about... Sometimes it's all about doing the new thing. Sometimes it's doubling down on the old thing. And I get a lot of different responses from all my guests. But what does entrepreneurship mean to you?
So for me personally, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what it means. It means there is no plan B. So when I was when I graduated college, I actually had done a startup and did some interesting stuff during the first .com boom, 1999, 2000. The startup ended up failing. And then I made a tragic mistake. I tried to go to the traditional career route like all my friends were doing, and quite frankly, were succeeding. So I had friends who went to investment banking, went to consulting, became doctors. My brother's a doctor. And I said, okay, well, the .com thing happened. It didn't really work out. Let's get serious. And so the mistake I made is actually went away from technology, and I went away from my own projects that I can control, that I'm going to go become a successful consultant or work in an iBank. And I tried to do that. And for me personally, it took me about 7 years to realize this. 7 years of basically getting kind of smacked in the face. But it took me 7 years to realize that in a highly structured environment, no matter how smart I was or even how determined I was, structured environments tend to minimize my strengths and maximize my weaknesses. And so I was like never up for promotion. I was, always got kind of reprimanded by my bosses, even though I thought I was doing better work than some of my peers. And I was like, it literally was like, man, like I'm not getting anywhere. Meanwhile, my buddies, all of the guys I went to college with, they're getting promoted, they're making great money, they're getting, big responsibility, and I'm like floundering in my jobs. And finally, I kind of had this sort of sad epiphany, like, man, I got to figure out my own thing. Like and for me, your original question, what does entrepreneurship mean? It means there's no plan B. It's not like I choose to do entrepreneurial things, whether it's Superpowered or whether it's writing books or what have you, because I think there's glory and I love it. Although I think there can be some glory and I do like it. For me, there's no plan B. It would be really hard for me to find success, be it financial, be it emotional, be it spiritual, in highly structured environments. And that's not to say that everyone's like me. We're all different, and we have different strengths, different weaknesses. And again, one of my best friends, he became partner at a huge consulting firm that everybody in the professional world would know, and he makes great money and his clients love him and he's fantastic at what he does. And he does quite well in the structured environment. In fact, I think he would do probably poorly in a less structured environment. And so we're kind of opposites in that way. And for me, and this is sort of one of the reasons I wrote this book, Hustle, is the main point we actually make in Hustle, and sort of I forget which chapter we kind of get to it, but we talk about this learned blindness, which I think is the greatest risk that anyone that faces, where you become blind to what you were meant to be, or what you're meant to do, and what your talents are. Right? We sort of blindly accept, like, oh, okay, we should go point A to point B to point C. We go to college, we get a job, and again, I'm not saying that's wrong. Some people it's great for, and some people thrive in that environment. I'm not trying to sort of besmirch that path.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you're not that person, if you're a little weird, if you're a little off kilter, if you're a little quirky, that path can be one that's tiresome. It's one that chafes, and if that's the case, then you really need to figure out where your talents are and sort of become unblind to what those are. And it took me a long time to figure this out. This wasn't like instantaneous. And basically the way you figure it out is by doing lots of stuff, some of which will fail, by the way, very painfully, will cause all sorts of embarrassment and humiliation. But doing the wrong thing tells us what the right thing is. And that's a fundamental part of Hustle, is understanding that if you take the path that's not beaten, you're going to fail. And I'm not glorifying failure. Failure is terrible. It's embarrassing. It's painful, humiliating. I'm not saying we should fail, but I'm saying that if you take sort of these indirect paths that people who are a little bit odd or innovative, just they're not exactly stamped out of a box. There's going to be some failure. You got to learn from that. And the biggest thing, again, as a person, and you and I talked about our children before the interview, is one thing I really feel strongly about is, as a father, I need to make sure I'm not injecting my projection about what my children should be. I need to sort of stem my own ego and help my kids figure out who they are. And that sounds very easy. It's actually very hard. But it means doing a lot of stuff and learning from both the wins and the failures, and then figuring out what your strengths are. And the big next step of that is not trying to bolster your weakness, but bolster your strengths. And I didn't understand it either, where like I'm like, oh, one of my weaknesses is X. I really should work on X. My observation is that we're much better off doubling down on our strengths than actually trying to bolster our weaknesses up. And I found that successful people tend to have come to the same conclusion. That's another big part of Hustle, is figure out what you're good at, make yourself even better, and then the weak points, accept them, but don't spend your time beating yourself to death trying to make those things better.
So Patrick, wow, there's so many great gems and jewels in that answer there. I talked to so many people who are like, I felt no other calling in my life besides entrepreneurship, and it was just the thing for me. And I was just kind of born an entrepreneur, and I knew it from the beginning. And, honestly, it's really, really difficult for me to resonate with those messages because I have kind of flip-flop back and forth. Like, I had this urge in the beginning of my career, like I wanted to do something different. I did not want to go down the traditional, like I resisted college. I didn't, finish my degree and get that. And I didn't know what exactly I wanted to do, but just doing the day-to-day grind of going and working for somebody else just didn't feel like the right answer. Excuse me, I did it, and once I got there, I was able to kind of figure out how to be successful in that environment. But it took a lot of work and a lot of changing me from, in some ways, in a very powerful, like positive way, right? Getting over my social anxiety and stuff like that helped me in that area. But on the other hand, I also had to, temper my creativity and temper my excitement about doing something new and changing something and implementing, something different, because it was many a times, that's not the priority of the business right now. What we need to do is double down and focus on this old thing that has been running successfully for year after year. And I'm like, yeah, but we could do something better, and we could shift things around and make a change. And so I really felt strongly when you were talking about this about, that we need to focus on our strengths and accept our weaknesses, but don't beat ourselves up about them. So maybe what were some of the things that you saw in yourself at this time when you were struggling with working for somebody else and just being a really good employee somewhere else? What were the strengths that you felt were not being recognized in that work? And maybe, if you don't mind, like one or two weaknesses that were just kind of getting you beat down about.
Sure. So, in fact, I talk about this in my book, Hustle. I recognize this urge to innovate and create something new, and kind of go against the grain. I think it's in a lot of folks who have at least some entrepreneurial spirit. And so, I remember I worked for a consulting company, and actually sort of a family company. Very nice people, actually. They were actually more than fair to me, and I understood technology a fair bit better than some of my bosses did. And I remember pitching them we had a small technology problem around some Excel sheets, and we were basically doing, we called it data analysis, but we were basically doing data formatting. And it made me crazy. I mean, literally, there was no creative thought or analysis happening in my brain. It would take me like 2 hours. And it was basically a sophisticated data formatting. And to me, it was clear that like a software program should be doing this. And then I pitched my boss on this, and my boss, great guy actually, but just didn't have any technology background. I didn't really think about, in a lot of ways, the opposite of me. He was sort of the guy who didn't want to do the, he didn't have any of the, shiny next thing syndrome, right? He was always like, let's do what works and let's not deviate from that. And in some cases, I think that's a great strategy and a very powerful strategy. And so I was so frustrated, and so I caused some dissension in the ranks. And I don't see this in like I'm a cool rebel. I see it now, like it was probably really irritating where things are kind of going the way they are. And then here I come, I'm like, guys, we're doing this all wrong. And so I pitched my boss, and I didn't even do a good job pitching. So in the book, I talk about how I pitched my boss on this. It wasn't even a pitch. It was just very nakedly selfish about me. And I said, look, I have this problem with Excel sheets. We should do a macro. And my boss was like, what's a macro? I'm like, oh, well, it's a scripting language called Visual Basic. Microsoft designed it. It would solve this problem. And my boss didn't have the problem, and he's like, well, no. Long story short, I went out and I hired a developer and actually did the Visual Basic script myself. Did the business logic. My wife at the time, she thought I was crazy. She's like, I can't believe you did this. like why would you pay $800 for this? And I'm like, it's just making me crazy that I'm spending literally 3 hours a day doing this data formatting that a script could do in literally less than 1 second. I feel it's like an insult to my intelligence. And then I did it, and I went back to my boss, and then I said, look, I did it. And he's like, didn't I tell you not to do this? I'm like, you did, but it works, and everybody in the company is already using it. And so they kind of grudgingly paid me. And I'm not, again, I don't want to make myself seem heroic and great. I can see why it would be a pain in the ass what I did, where I kind of went against my boss's suggestion,
right?
And kind of took the ball in my own hands, and I can see that's actually a weakness where I didn't take orders well. I thought I knew what had to be done, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe in this case I did, but it's also not a good idea just to rock the boat, right? It may feel cool or smart or rebellious when you're young, but if you're trying to run a business, it can be really, really, really annoying, quite frankly, and disrupt the business. So anyway, that was one of the incidents where I said, oh, man, like I see the world in fundamentally different ways. I need to go do this by myself and make my own mistakes and make my own successes. And I've had sort of an up and down path. And a few years after I left that job, actually became a New York Times bestselling author with my book, The Lean Entrepreneur, which came about because I published previous to that a self-published book called The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development, which got kind of caught up in this upswell of lean startup back in 2010 in the Silicon Valley and actually globally. And we did a good job with the self-published book, but there's also this upswelling, this tide of lean startup. It carried us along. We made a lot of money and a lot of great, experiences based on the book. And what it taught me, if you're going to be hustling, if you're a little bit weird, if you're going to do something off kilter, you got to go do something. And you don't want to run into what I would call the perils of perfection or the madness of mastery. The most important is you do something and you take a step forward. And I literally became a New York Times bestselling author because Wiley, the publisher, they were looking to publish a lean book. They looked around what was on the market. They saw our self-published book. And they're like, hey, you guys want to do a bigger traditional book? And we ended up doing a deal with them, and the book did great and did a bunch of stuff. But they would have never found us had we not self-published and sort of put ourselves out there and created something and created what I call proof. Where people can see proof of your creative abilities. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an artist, you have to provide, I believe, proof. And that could be a company, it could be a portfolio, it could be an open source project, it could be a podcast. And what it isn't is a resume. What it isn't is just telling someone what you're capable of. People nowadays are craving for proof. And that's a big part of what we talk about in Hustle, is how you build this personal opportunity portfolio, and one of those pieces is proof. You got to show proof that you're capable of creation, quite frankly.
Oh man, this is such great stuff. So Patrick, in just a moment, I want to ask you about how we can, fail forward in these examples, right? Because as you said at the beginning, like, failure sucks, and it's not. There's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of folks who are preaching the entrepreneurship methodology as it's awesome to fail and it's fun to fail. And to be quite frank, like, dude, that sucks for me, and I don't like failing. I don't like just the worry of, okay, well, if this doesn't work, then how am I going to make the next thing work? And how am I going to make the next thing work, right? And when am I going to be able to, like, pay the bills for my family and take care of my kids and all that kind of stuff? So maybe you can help us through that struggle in just a moment. But first, we'll take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by Minio Cloud Storage. Minio is a cloud object storage server for developers and DevOps written in Go. The Go programming language is the emerging language of choice for modern cloud infrastructure projects, and it allows Minio to be highly concurrent and lightweight. Minio is Amazon S3 compatible, built with microstorage architecture in mind, but at its heart, Minio is simple, scalable, and supported by a passionate developer and user community. In episode 89 of Hello Tech Pros, I talked with A.B. Periasamy, one of the founders of Minio, about the importance of community support and recruiting software developers who are as passionate about their product's code as artists are of their art. Check out that episode at hellotechpros.com/89 and check out Minio Cloud Storage at minio.io. That's minio.io. Are you new to podcasting? Are you looking for a fast, high-quality, yet budget-friendly podcast production team? Let TransSource Media take care of you. With a team of professional audio and video editors, writers, and graphic artists, they can help you build your podcast from planning, post-production, and platform submission. Using only cutting-edge software and studio equipment, they're here to make each and every show sound at its best. To get a free quote, please visit www.transsourcemedia.com or send them an email at marketing@transsourcemedia.com or call them at 209-505-5693. TransSource Media, transforming businesses through the power of multimedia. Okay, we're back with Patrick Vlaskovits. Patrick is a New York Times bestselling author and entrepreneur. He is the CEO of Superpowered and also the author of the book Hustle: The Power to Charge Your Life with Money, Meaning, and Momentum. And Patrick, before the break, you were talking about in the book, you give examples of, if you're going to be weird and off kilter, right? If you have this entrepreneurship spirit inside of you and you just kind of think differently or operate differently in the workplace and doing the same thing day in and day out, the stuff that works, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If that just kind of irritates you a little bit and you need to fix it because you see that there's improvements that could be made. Yeah, it's working great, but it could be better. It could be automated. It could be taken to a different audience or something. And so if you have this in you, then you need to go out there and do it. And as you said at the beginning, entrepreneurship means that there's no plan B, that there is no other option for you. You need to not worry so much about failing. You need to not worry so much about your weaknesses, but count on your strengths and push forward. So that's all great, and that's very inspiring, and that's very motivational. But how do we do it in such a way that's positive, right? How do we fail forward in a way that's positive for ourselves and builds us this personal portfolio of things that we have done, whether, like you said, it's a book or it's a podcast or it's a technology or it's a service that we provide. When those things fail, how do we use that as the stepping stone to our next thing, which will hopefully not be a failure?
So that's a big question, and I can think of sort of multiple ways to kind of try to bite off parts of that. But the first thing I would say is that most people they focus too much on perfection, and in the book we call this the perils of perfection and the madness of mastery. And our point, and we say this over and over and over and again, you don't have to take a huge step. You don't have to jump off the proverbial cliff and assemble your parachute on the way down. You just need to take a small step. And so we talk about what we call the unseen laws of hustle. And the first step, the first law is do something that moves you. And by that we mean, one, moves you. You're taking a step, physically taking a step. You're not just complaining. You're not just kind of bitching or kvetching about like, oh, I hate my job, blah, blah, blah. You're going to have to go do something. You're going to have to. It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to quit your job overnight, come up with a genius idea, and try to make it happen. But you got to do something, right? So do something that moves you. And then a big part of it too is separating what moves you emotionally. And one of the, again, mistakes I made in my career is I would look to extrinsic sources as motivators. So I'd be like, oh, what are VCs talking about? What's exciting them? What are my peers? What do my peers think is cool? What do my parents think is cool? And at the end of the day, if that doesn't really align what's sort of buried inside of you, and what really moves you emotionally, it's going to be tough to execute. And there's a quote we talk about in the book, and it's from The Little Prince, a book written post World War II by a Frenchman whose name I always butcher, but I'll just go straight to the quote that a fox says to the Little Prince, and he says, "One sees clearly only with the heart. Anything essential is invisible to the eyes." And that sounds cute and airy-fairy and sort of meaningless. And probably 10 years ago, I'd have been like, "That's such bullshit. Like, don't bother me. This garbage." But for me, especially once you have children, you actually see the difference. You see the difference between sort of the logical, rational layer and the deep subconscious stuff that actually motivates you and your children, how you behave, and also, quite frankly, how it motivates you in entrepreneurship. And so you have to try to get a hold of that. What is that thing that moves you? The second part we talk about, the second law is, we say keep your head up and your eyes open. And the story I like to tell there is the actual process of moving or changing or doing actually unveils opportunity for you as you do it. In fact, we call that hustle luck, and all entrepreneurs are basically trying to reap hustle luck, which is distinct from random luck. Random luck is I'm going to a concert with my wife and I'm looking for a parking spot, and a parking spot opens up in front of me in the parking lot, and I pull in. Hustle luck is the luck that you can harvest when you go do something, right? This is exactly what entrepreneurs, whether you're Elon Musk or whether you're a guy in a basement in Kenosha, Wisconsin, working on the next web app, you are doing, you're creating, and all sorts of luck starts emerging. And if you have what we say, keep your head up, eyes open, you can actually harvest some of that luck. And then the last one we talk about, the last what we call the unseen law, and probably the scariest of all the laws, is we say seal the deal and make it real. And we're very specific about this. It's not enough just to dream and maybe do a little bit and dream and do a dream board and then talk about your dreams and kind of wish for them. You need to create a transaction in some way. There has to be some exchange of value, and it has to be a punctuated stop. that signals to you that you've created something. And it can be small. It doesn't have to be huge, but you have to, and this is where a lot of people who are excited about entrepreneurship, they get stuck right here, where it's like, oh, I have to transact. And the answer is yes, you have to transact. And it's a strong signal to your subconscious that you're doing something, that you've advanced, that you've ticked the meter forward. You don't, otherwise, you will just tire yourself out sort of dreaming and kind of forever. And those transactions, like I don't know how many times, like where I've been in a rut and I haven't been able to close a big deal. And then, I've been working on, let's say, $50,000, $100,000 deal, and I'm just getting, for whatever reason, maybe it's environment, zeitgeist, maybe I'm not selling well, I'm not feeling well, I can't close a deal. And I'll close like a small, tiny deal. Just the close of the transaction will give me the confidence to get back in the ring. And a lot of people overlook this. And again, the transaction itself doesn't have to be huge, but there's got to be something. And that's, I think, that's how you answer that question of how do you manage that risk? How do you manage that failure? It doesn't have to be you don't have to take on huge risk. You don't have to fail spectacularly. You can take small steps, but if you take them, again, you do something that moves you, you keep your eyes open for opportunity, and then you transact a deal. You seal the deal, make it real. That is the sort of what I believe is a significant articulated path to success.
Man, that story, all of those stories so much resonate with me because I was a dreamer for many, many years, right? So after the dot-com bubble burst, I said, okay, I'm going to go off on my own and do my own thing, and really just took the opportunity for about 8-9 months to just kind of hide in a hole and really get down on myself about my social anxiety and not get out there in the world. And so then when I took my steps into, okay, I'm going to face my fears, I'm going to get back to work, I'm going to, go to a Fortune 100 big organization, get involved into a lot of cool development opportunities that are going on there. And then I still had this entrepreneurship spirit, right? That I wanted to create something else, but I didn't know exactly what it was. So instead of creating it, I dreamed about it. And I bought a lot of domain names that I never actually implemented. I bought a lot of, I started kind of tinkering with different website stuff, but never actually launched a website. I started tinkering with different code for different apps that I kind of had playing around in my mind, but I never actually built an app and released it to the world. And this happened, Patrick, for like 14 years, right? And it was on and on and on and all the time. And I was constantly telling my wife, telling my family, you know what, I gotta work this weekend. I gotta work tonight. And looking back over almost a decade and a half is like, I wasn't working, I was playing, I was pretending. I had this dream of I want to do something, but I never actually committed myself to actually move a step forward to that transactional state where I'm actually going to release something and say, you know what, even if it fails, I'm okay. But it's done, it's out there, it's in the world until April of this year when I launched the podcast, Hello Tech Pros. And here we are today, right? This is episode 216. So 216 steps forward and things are happening, right? The hustle luck is happening in my life. And I see all these opportunities that are opening up now just because I actually launched something and put something out there. And at the very beginning, it wasn't that big a deal. It didn't, like you said, I didn't take a spectacular leap. It took a laptop, it took a microphone, and it took bravery in order to ask a couple of friends to record a couple of episodes. And that was the first step. And who knows where it will go, but I think you're right on the money, man. This is good. I'm going to have to go pick up this book, Hustle, the Power to Charge Your Life with Money, Meaning, and Momentum, because just talking to you, man, it's resonating so much with me. Before we go, Patrick, do you mind sharing any parting words of wisdom that you have for our audience, the best way that we can connect with you and find your book, and then we'll say goodbye?
Sure. So let's do it backwards. So the best way to connect with me would be you can come to my website. It's my last name. So it's spelled V as in Victor, LASKOVITS.com. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm at PV, so Patrick Vlaskovits. So PV, I'm pretty easy to find on Twitter. And of course, you can buy Hustle, the Power to Charge Your Life with Money, Meaning, and Momentum on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, CEO Read, indie books. They're everywhere anywhere books are sold, including airports and things like that. So, as far as parting words of wisdom, so I completely recognize what you just described, where you dream, and then again it's this peril of perfection. Like you feel like you can't release an idea to the world unless it's perfect, and it's never perfect. And I struggled with this as well, where I'm like, oh, this is going to be it. This is going to be it. And invariably, like some defect, something would mar my perfect idea, and I wouldn't release it. And then I kind of move on, and you string a few of those together, and guess what? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years are gone. And and I really, and this is why I think this idea, seal the deal, make it real, resonates with you and me, because we've done this, and again, anyone who thinks they may be in that, we call this in the book, cycle of suck or mediocrity of meh, where you're kind of like doing something, but it's not really failing, so you're maybe not be motivated to change, but you're not really winning either. Remember, you don't have to take a huge step. You can take a small step, but you got to make it real. You got to have a transaction, right? So for you, the podcast, it was launching the podcast, putting it out there, recording a few episodes. And guess what? It is real. You now have a podcast. Was the first few episodes going to change the world? No, but that's okay. That nothing ever changes the world from the get go, right? And maybe that's not even your goal, right? Maybe it was conquering some of this, like you mentioned, your social anxiety and judging. For me, I know with my first book, I was very anxious. Like I was like, fuck, I don't know if I'm ready to put this thing out there. And then we even found spelling errors and all this stuff. And now, once you do that a few times, you realize, and once you get to know, people in your space. So like for you, it might be podcasters and other entrepreneurs. For me, entrepreneurs and writers, you see that everybody suffers from the same anxiety, the same fears. No one's got it figured out. Everybody puts on, their pants one leg at a time. And the really important thing is seal the deal, make it real. And you do that, and like you say, all sorts of opportunities start popping up. People, they want to be part of your movement, part of your message. They want to experience you and see how you think. And again, it's kill that dreaming that we call the ODing, over dreaming, right? Don't OD on dreaming, and in fact, go out and the way we say it is do dream ownership. And so that would be my parting words of wisdom, if I have any wisdom.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value your final words of wisdom as well as the rest of the podcast, man. This has inspired me to really think about the things that I've been doing, both the things that I did before I started the podcast and now the things that I've been doing afterwards, and what has generated success or what has generated the change in Chad. And the change is a good thing, right? So we need to grow. We need to double down on our strengths and don't worry about our weaknesses. Forgive ourselves of our own weaknesses and double down on those things that we're strong at and be proud of that. And so I really appreciate that message. To me, it spoke volumes.
Great. Well, thank you, Chad, and thanks for having me on. And hopefully, your listeners get some value from our little conversation.
I know they did. Tech Pros, if you are out there and you're thinking about, gosh, man, I feel you, but I don't know what my thing is. I don't know do I write some code? Do I build an app? I kind of want to do some things. Great, do it. Just do it. Just get something out there. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be good. It's just got to be done. Just get something done and release it. Even if it's just released to a few friends, just send it to me. Send me a link, and say, hey, Chad, I did this and I'm afraid to share it with the world, but I want to let you know because you and Patrick have inspired me to do this thing. Get something out there. And through that process of releasing it to the world and proving to yourself that you are a completionist, not a dreamer, then it will make a huge shift in your mindset and a huge shift in your ability to be a successful entrepreneur. You've been listening to Patrick Vlaskovits, and I'm Chad Bostic. And until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/216. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Entrepreneurship Saturday, but tomorrow my featured guest and I will not be talking about work because it's Sunday being unplugged. On Monday, we'll get motivated once again to face the week with Motivation Monday, followed by Tuesday, productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people communication, and Saturday, back to our entrepreneurship. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.